Now we're being recorded. Here's what I'm going to ask you to do. Turn to your neighbor, if you have a neighbor, and tell them how much you weigh. And I'll pause while you nervously giggle and blush and fumble through that conversation. I'd love to know how many people actually answered the question. And furthermore, I wonder how many people lied when they answered. I mean, I guess that since most of you are participants in this contest, you've already decided that the number isn't the one that's ideal for you. But maybe you're uncomfortable sharing it because it's so much worse than the person sitting next to you. Or, you know, maybe it's the reverse. Maybe your number is actually far better than the person sitting next to you, which also is cause for anxiety. I mean, all of us have a massive amount of anxiety around the shape of our bodies, no matter what shape they're in. No matter where you are in the fitness spectrum, it's just another one of those ought to things that can increase the anxiety in our lives, isn't it? No matter what you're doing, you ought to be doing something else, so it would seem. I know I feel that way. Not now, but, you know, on many, many occasions. The concern that we have about our weights and our measures is probably disproportionate compared to other things that are far more important. You know, the content of our character, and you know, which is demonstrated in a number of ways. Our productivity and our focus at work, our work-life balance, the way we treat our loved ones, so many things that are more important than the number on a scale. But here's the realization I had about vulnerability. Even people who are at their peak levels of fitness have something in their lives that they're neglecting. Everyone has something that takes a back seat to physical, mental, spiritual, or emotional health. And honestly, it can feel pretty virtuous at times. Let's be honest, when you're pulling an all-nighter to get ahead at work, or you're skipping on family events to put appearances in at work events that may help you also get ahead, or hey, maybe even if you're ghosting on your friends and crashing on the couch because you're just too exhausted by the end of the day to think about going out. We've all done it. All of these behaviors have the same roots as the choices not to exercise and eat right, like, oh, I'm so busy. I mean, we see it time and time again how people and we ourselves brag about our busyness, and the lack of time we have to exercise or prepare foods properly is just evidence of how great and important we are. On a logical level, we know that this is not healthy behavior, and yet we manifest these unhealthy behaviors all the time. The key to breaking these bad habits is to shed a little light on them. And in my case, it took shedding a floodlight on them. And that's what the Fittest Loser Challenge allowed me to do. Basically, I invited 7 million of my closest friends, readers of the Daily Herald, into my process toward replacing toxic mindsets like the one I described with ones that would actually help me get where I wanted to go. So when I was selected to interview for the final 5 positions in the contest last year, I can't lie, I knew I had a real shot. I have plenty of weaknesses, believe me, but one of my strengths is my ability to charm people in an interview setting. One of the most interesting questions they asked was, during the interview, what is your support network like? And I answered well enough, you know, taking into account my family, my friends, my colleagues in my business association, but I didn't feel as if I'd answered that well enough. That night, I went home and wrote a follow-up letter, a thank you letter. As you can see, I described layer after layer of exposure I already had to people who were eager to be supportive if I only asked. And while this amount of support in my life is incredibly precious to me, what it isn't is rare. I can guarantee that you, every last person who's listening to this today, have these same or similar layers in your life if you look closely enough. I hadn't thought about these groups of people in this way before being asked this question by Eileen and Josh. Eileen, by the way, is the mastermind at the Daily Herald who runs the Fittest Loser contest, and Josh is the owner of Push Fitness. They were the people who interviewed me. I invite you to ask yourselves, who it is that you can get a little vulnerable with in your life and the benefits that you might get from making that leap. So I made it Facebook official on Groundhog Day last year, announcing to everybody that I was calling them into my life as somebody who would be called upon to help me. I want to say something here about selflessness. I mean, so many people who struggle with weight are overextended. You know, they volunteer, they'll leap at the chance to do something for others. I know that I was in that camp for sure, and I'd put myself last. And for people who have that mindset, I'm here to tell you that it's your responsibility to prepare yourself to give. You can't give of yourself if you're struggling with health issues, and not putting yourself first is the quickest path toward finding yourself struggling with issues with your weight and with your health. This post got more likes than I had ever received on Facebook for any post I'd ever put out there, except for one. The one that got more likes than that was something I posted just one day earlier last year when I got banged. So I'm here to tell you that for as nice as it is to solicit feedback from the internet, Facebook is weird. So just kind of keep that in mind. With that, I'm moving on to the third lesson I learned, which was accountability. It's one thing to reveal to people you trust that you're aiming toward goals, but it's another thing to keep those people engaged and share with them your successes as well as your setbacks. One of the best things I did early on was decide to keep a publicly accessible album of pictures and stories that chronicled this whole experience. My mindset was that so long as someone was telling my story, like the Daily Herald, I might as well also contribute my own commentary. I guess that if people were intent on finding out more about me after seeing me in the paper or hearing about the contest, I might as well populate the internet with my own discoverable content. In a way, it felt kind of like protection against people making false assumptions. The shortened URL, that bit.ly URL over to the side, is the link to that album I have on Facebook to this day, if anyone's interested. I still post to it from time to time with thoughts that I find to be relevant to this topic. With that, this might be the first place to pause and see if there are any questions that people would like to ask. I do have one here, it looks like, from Joe in Arlington Heights. I'll just sum it up to say that it's about, I guess, my feelings on, surrendering some privacy from the contest, both in the newspaper and online through social media. That's a good question. My answer, I guess, with regard to Facebook is yes, I made the album public, but my profile is definitely private. There's very little about me that I reveal in the album that wasn't already in the newspaper, other than like some of my opinions or maybe some small moments in between the headlines. I fortunately haven't had a bad experience with putting myself out there in such a public way in either forum, through social media or online, or in print for that matter. For the most part, I'm sure that has to do with the fact that I'm not posting anything terribly controversial or salacious. Just the same, I recognize that inviting this many people into private aspects of my life has some risk that accompanies it, and all I can say from personal experience is that it's been nothing but positive for me. Yeah. All right, so moving on. The fourth thing that I wanted to talk about today is deference. You cannot create new habits while holding on to bad ones from the past. It's as simple as that. You've got to have the kinds of people in your life, the kinds of experts who will, like I said on the screen here, ask the hard questions, push you past your limits safely, and let you focus on your highest and best use. And what do I mean by that? I don't know what variety of programs each of you have adopted during this challenge, but I'm here to tell you that you can't just follow them halfway. Yes, there's a certain amount of customization that you can do to make a program your own, but resist the urge, if you can, to cobble together a bunch of tactics shared with you by a bunch of people or found in various places. The more effective approach, by all means, is to find a program and stick with it 100%. This is the time when I get to talk about my trainer, Steve, the adorable guys. Really, all of the trainers at Push Fitness have become personal friends of mine. But we were matched up well. At our first meeting, after doing a lot of strength and flexibility and cardiovascular assessments, one of the things I had to do was, and I quote, run as hard as if you were being chased for 12 minutes. That's not easy. So I was ready to pass out and sweating like a pig, to be frank. And he asked me while I'm wheezing what good times would be to schedule our personal training sessions, of which there were 2 each week as granted by the Fittest Loser program. I'm gasping, I'm sweating, and I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty open. And without a beat, he's like, that's what she said. I knew we were going to get along just fine. But here's the thing about entrusting yourself to the experts that I want to get serious about. If you've chosen the right ones, those experts are not going to be your friends all the time. They're not always going to be nice. They're not always going to make you feel comfortable or tell you what you want to hear. If they are doing those things, you've chosen the wrong experts. Everyone in this webinar is an expert, I guarantee it, in some regard, on some topic. Maybe you haven't discovered what that something is, but I guarantee that every person on this conference is better at something than anyone else listening. I know that every last person here has something to say that is valuable enough to send the presentation over to you. But that doesn't make you the expert at everything. Total disclosure, I suck. I'm not at many things, okay? But I am more successful today as a whole because of having the best of myself, of not only the things that I'm very bad at, but also the things that I'm good enough at. Those are the most important things to get off your plate if you want to elevate your game from where it is today to where it really, truly ought to be.